Hello everyone, thank you for joining me on this podcast episode. Now before it starts, I just want to take 1 or 2 minutes to update you on something that's happened recently. Something that's made me feel sad, frustrated and angry. And not just me, everyone that's following this work when I recently announced this on my social media. YouTube have decided to demonetize my channel completely. I have appealed it, but this is their final decision. They deem my content and my videos to be unsuitable for their audience and unsafe for their viewers. Therefore, they're not going to show adverts on my videos, and therefore they're not going to pay me for views like they pay all the other YouTube content creators and channels out there. Now, this is a massive thing because money is very important here. It helps me evolve and grow these platforms and extend the reach. It helps me make better quality content, and also this is my full-time job, so I need to make some kind of living out of it. Yes, we are hugely frustrated at this, but this is not the only setback that I've experienced through doing this work, so I will continue forward. If you'd like to support this work and help me evolve these channels, please do like, comment and share all the videos that you think are worth doing for that. And also, if you'd like to donate to this cause, please go to jeremyindica.com. You can donate there, and at the very least I can start improving the production quality of this podcast to make it more appealing to more people. You can also purchase the merchandise that we recently released. Go check that out, somethingtosayofficial.com. There are 4 incredible designs done by Naria, and it is exciting times for this project. I hope you enjoy this podcast. It's a phenomenal conversation. I learned a lot from it, and I hope you do too. Thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode here on this channel where we are investigating this topic in the different detail to help us understand more. It's getting really exciting as I attract attention of guests that have something to say. Now today we have Mike Brewer, who is an ex-police officer, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about all of that as the conversation unfolds. I'm really excited for this one. I hope you enjoy it as much as I believe I'm going to enjoy it, and we're going to get so much information about this, and this is everything that we wanted to aim for. So, hi, Mike Brewer. Thanks for agreeing to be on my podcast.
Hi, thanks. Thanks very much for inviting me.
No problem, Mike. Could you spend a brief moment explaining who you are, what you do, and what you did for a career, please?
Yeah, okay. So, as you say, my name is Mike Brewer. I'm a retired detective sergeant. I spent just over 30 years in the Avon and Somerset Constabulary, um, and the vast majority of that time I was involved in the criminal investigations arena. And for 6 years, from 2006 until 2012, I was actually in charge of the district's child abuse investigation team.
Incredible. Incredible work. Probably so challenging, I can only imagine. So it was the last 6 years that you were specifically in the child abuse investigation team?
Not the last 6 years. In 2012, I moved on to something else, and I actually retired in 2015.
Okay, amazing. How was that as a career?
Brilliant,
Okay.
really rewarding. I mean, I'm the type of character who gets bored quite easily,
Mm.
and the police, there's so many different avenues and things you can go down. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you go to work in the morning and you really don't know what's going to happen that day. So it's yeah, really good. Really,
Okay, and
for
that's
me, it was perfect.
and that's such an optimistic way or an optimistic explanation that I kind of wasn't expecting, because I would expect the ex-police officer to be like, it was challenging, it was exhausting, it was frustrating, but your response is quite different.
It was all of those things, but I
Mm.
enjoy that. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I think
So in the early part of your career leading up to the child abuse investigation team work, was there any other bits of your career, just so that I'm clear on that, were there any other bits of your career that were to do with the safety of children?
um, when I very first joined the job, you had to go away and do a project, um, and then come back and give a talk about it. your fellow students. And I chose to go and spend some time working with the NSPCC, and that sort of always sat in the back of my mind, that the work that they do, and the work that's done, not necessarily using the enforcement arm of the police, arresting offenders and locking people up, which is obviously very important, but also the almost a softer part of the police, where you're trying to make sure that because we go to a lot of situations, we spend a lot of time in people's houses that other people don't get into. So we're able to see things going on, and we may be the first point where we go into a house and see something with children involved, which doesn't sit comfortably, and it's important that we're able to recognise that and report that back.
Phenomenal. And this is where I truly believe, how do I word this? It's like every time we talk about the police these days, we want to shoot them down, and complain that the service isn't great or they're useless or this type of attitude. And I think it's really nice for us to see what kind of job it actually is, because that is not an easy job. Even just like what you're saying, going into households where something has happened, or something has happened which then when you visit the house makes you look at some other things that are going on around within the household, and it's not a straightforward job.
No. I mean, you turn up for a job, and you've been called to a house for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe a burglary or whatever, and then you get there and you realise actually there's 6 children here, and they're living in really bad situation.
Wow.
And they're badly clothed, they look hungry, So
Wow.
as going back to what I said earlier, you just don't know what you're going to deal with, really, and you have to have a very open mind. And I'm not going to defend the police. Sometimes we get it very badly wrong, but the vast majority of times we don't, and it is really difficult.
Okay, so yes, of course, everyone in every industry, every employee in every industry gets it wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
This is one of the points that I'm trying to make when I do my presentations, and people are so angry at the police section of my presentation. I'm like, yeah, of course, there's bad apples everywhere. In every job, in every industry, there are people who are not pulling their weight, or are maybe even corrupt themselves. But the vast majority of people are trying their hardest with the task that they're given for their job. I actually had, and I don't hear of anyone else who speaks in this way about their police experience, but my experience with trying to prosecute the man that abused me when I was a child was a good one, in the sense that the police, I could see, were really trying to help. They are just as interested as me in getting abusers of children, prosecuted. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that job. I remember when me and you first got in contact and we spoke, you mentioned about the child abuse investigation team. It's actually difficult to recruit people into that department. Was I correct in saying that?
It was. When I went there in 2006, I'll be honest, I didn't want to go. I was DS in the mainstream CID, dealing with all the things that at that time I thought were Gucci, and that your robberies and serious assaults, murders, etc. But it was the role I was in was actually considered quite a privileged role, and also a developmental role for other people. So I went for my annual career review in March of 2006. My excuse me, my detective chief inspector said, "Okay, so where's your career going? You've got 9 years still to serve. Where's your career going?" And I said, "Well, I'm happy doing what I'm doing." And he said, "Yeah, you're not doing that for 9 years." So there were a few options he gave me, and one of them was the child abuse investigation team, which I considered, well, at least it's still operational. You're still going to be arresting people and doing this sort of thing. So I said, I'll go for that. So in the September, I transferred across, and very, very quickly, I realised that it was the most important police work I'd ever done.
Wow.
And after a couple of months, where we were based, we actually weren't based in a police station, because we used to have child victims come to be interviewed, etc. so that they weren't intimidated by going to a police station. It was actually just a house on the
Mm.
estate. So he came across to see me after 3 months and said, how's it going? And I think he, a bit like you were earlier, he was expecting me to say, oh, it's dreadful, I don't want to
Huh.
do it. And I said, my God, this is really serious stuff.
Huh.
And I said, with the right detectives here, we could make a real impact. And what happened then over the next couple of years actually was, because I was still in contact with my colleagues from the main CID office, and I would go back and tell them this is really good stuff. And over the next couple of years, I recruited 5 or 6 of them onto my team,
Good on you.
and we had some really, really good results, some big successes. And the thing with child abuse investigation teams as well is there's more than one way to measure success, because yes, you lock up a bad person, that's great, and we did lock up a lot of bad people for a long time, but also just removing a child from a position of danger and getting them to safety, another real um, benefit, or you gain
Mm.
pleasure from the fact that,
Mm.
okay, we've managed to make that child safe. And so it was I think I told you before, it's the most rewarding work I've ever done in the police.
Wow.
And a lot of people sort of say to me, how did you do it? And it's odd, because the only thing I can equate it to is almost like being a pediatrician, a doctor. It's very sad that you're treating sick children, but actually you're able to do something about it.
Right.
And that's the way I was looking at it: is, yes, this is awful what's happening, but I'm not just a passive observer of this. I can get in and get stuck in and make it better, or
Right.
try to make it better. And that's why I find it so rewarding.
And that feeling of reward by either locking someone up, locking a criminal up so that they
Yeah,
cannot commit the crime again,
yeah,
or getting a child out of that abusive situation, that feeling that gives you overpowers the other side of the coin,
yeah,
right? The challenge and the disheartening and all the rest of it. I
yeah,
can only imagine.
yeah, yeah. It does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually very similar to what I do. Some people approach me and they say, doesn't it get you down dealing with this topic every day? And I'm like, yes, but the change that we're making through doing it just overpowers those negative emotions.
Yeah, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
so in general, in the police force, is joining the child abuse investigation team something that people do avoid?
Um, I think it's changed. I think it's changed. Certainly, um, by 2012, people wanted to go there. They were because the way it used to work was you'd be in uniform. You'd say you wanted to go in and be a detective. You do your detective training, and then you get posted to a CID, or wherever. But by 2012, I think people were coming out of doing their training saying, "No,
Oh.
I want to go to Kate. That's what I
Mm.
want to do." But unfortunately, then because of austerity and the cutbacks in the police, um, big changes were made. And for a time in Avon and Somerset Police, they did away with the specialist child abuse investigators. It was just dealt with by the main CID office again.
Okay.
And at the time, I considered that to be a mistake, because
Mm.
it's very specialist work, and I consider that a mistake. And actually, I think they've realised that was a mistake and are going back towards having specialist child abuse investigators now.
Okay. And one of the reasons why the specialist level is required is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because one of the reasons is because you're dealing with children. So
Yeah.
you're interacting with children, you're pulling them out of a situation that could even be their family home, and you're just trying to ensure the safety of children. Would that be one of the reasons why it was specialist?
Well, I mean, there's several parts to it. There is that, but you're required to interview children, and there's a thing called achieving best evidence, ABE, interviewing children. And if that's done on a video, you video, and then that video is played as their evidence in chief at court,
Wow.
rather than them have to stand and give their evidence in the witness box. That interview is played as their evidence, and so that has to be done very carefully, because you're not allowed to lead children
Right.
in any way, and so that you have to be specially trained for that. But also you have to deal very closely with social services, the health authority, schools, etc., etc. So it's a little bit different than your normal
Mm.
everyday CID officer would do.
Right.
But also you gain an understanding of of things, because when you first go there, some of the things you hear, you just think this can't be right.
Wow.
But after you've heard it, a few times, and you found actually it was right, you think, yeah, because it's very interesting, patterns with, like, for instance, grooming and things like that. The patterns you see, they repeat themselves, and
Mm.
you think, yeah, I've seen this happen before. So
Mm.
yeah. So the experience you gain, as much as the additional training, just the experience. Just
Yeah.
think, yeah, I know where this is going.
So you
It's
see,
interesting.
you see the common signs, or you see the traits in children. Maybe even
Yeah,
you can see when they're trying to protect their close family members who you're trying to get information on, and that must be such a skill to interview a child and not lead them on, or not, or you would have to ask the question in a certain way, I'm guessing, and the training on that is quite stringent.
yeah, yeah. You're not allowed to do one of these video interviews unless you pass the course,
Mm.
um, because um, because you're going to use it as evidence in chief. As I say, you can't lead a child, and it'd be very easy to lead a child as well. And
Yes.
um, so you ask open questions. We used to call it 5WH, which is what, when, where, why, how, and also use little TED. So your questions will be: tell me, explain to me, describe for me, so that
Okay.
they tell you in their own words.
Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting,
And
interesting.
how do you log off at the end of your shift and return back to your normal life? I just want to stay on the interviewing of children situation, where you clock off in the evening, you go home, and all you're thinking about is that little girl or little boy that you interviewed, that is in danger, or has been through something horrific, and
Yeah,
they look so sad in their eyes, but they're being children and trying to downplay it, or like, that must be so crushing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. One of the other things, because I was in charge of that team, one of the things I had to deal with was all child deaths
Wow.
on the district. And the ones that were really, really difficult were suicides, children committing suicide. And that made it very difficult for me at home to say no to my children. It really did, because you think, oh my God, because I dealt with one where a young boy wanted a day off school because to do something with his hobby, and his dad said, no, you can't. And the boy went upstairs and hung himself.
Oh my goodness.
And I had to deal with the parents, and I'm just looking at them thinking, how are you ever going to reconcile yourself with this?
Wow.
As I say, what I carried home was my children were spoiled. There's no doubt. And I've found it almost impossible to say no, because I was so concerned that maybe I mean, it wouldn't, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I understand how that could start changing your personality entirely,
yeah,
or changing your approach or your view of the world entirely.
yeah, yeah.
So maybe we could move to the criminals, the people that are actually carrying out this crime. I suppose people would be more willing to do the interviews with the children. They could get their head around that. They could see how maybe that could slot into who they are. That could be a job that they could do possibly. But when it comes to interviewing criminals, investigating criminals, being there would be, I'm pretty sure there'd be processes and procedures for that as well.
Yep.
Maybe we could just cover this like we covered the interviewing of children, please.
So yeah, we use a model to interview prisoners called the peace model, um, which basically, breaking it down, is before the interview you prepare, so what areas you want to talk about, and you have that a very clear plan in your head. Then when the interview starts, you engage and explain. So you you're basically trying to get people to talk to you. So you tell them the process of where the interview is going to go, and what sort of questions you're going to ask them. and make sure they understand the process, because you're trying to put them at ease. And then you ask for their account. You say, right, I want you to tell me everything that happened between 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock on Wednesday evening, whatever. And then you let them go. You just let them go and talk about that. Don't interrupt. But then the next part is the challenge. So then, they've talked uninterrupted, and then you go back and you break it down into areas. And then if there are areas you need to go into more depth, you challenge. And then at the end of the interview, you go away and evaluate it and see what evidence you've got or haven't, and then what else you need and how you're going to go about that. So that's the process we use. It's called the peace model. And it's really good. It's really, really, really good. But the thing you've got to be is you almost have to be a sponge, because they'll be looking at you, they'll be talking to you, they'll be judging you as well. And one of the things I used to say to them is, I'm not judging you, my friend. Someone else's job is to judge you. I'm just here to get what happened.
Okay.
We put the facts. Somebody else will judge you, not me. Because obviously, the big thing you're trying to do is get them to talk to you. If they say nothing, then that's much more difficult.
Okay, so you have to. We talked about interviewing the children and how emotional that could be, because you have feelings of feeling sorry for them, or you're so horrified that they've been through an experience or are going through an experience, and you just want to kind of save them. But this is going to give you the flip side feeling, I'm going to imagine. If that person is guilty or has been guilty in the past, this is not their first offense, or you can just tell, you got a sense that they have done all of these crimes. You've still got to remain neutral, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You've got to resist the bias of your human nature coming into that interview.
Yeah, because the very nature of what you're talking about, they're going to find it difficult to talk to a complete stranger about it anyway. If they think you're sat there judging them and talking down at them, they're not going to talk to you, and that's what you want them to talk to you. I used to say to my colleagues, we're almost trying to sell timeshare here, but the timeshare is in prison. So you can't let them see disgust in your face or anything, because they're like to clam up. So you've just got to be a sponge, nod, and okay, regardless of how you're feeling inside. That's how you've got to come across. And there's a really interesting thing going back to the child interviews.
Yes,
because I did some work with some very eminent child psychologists, and they said with the child interviews, children are really, really switched on. They're far more switched on than we understand. And they said they'll be judging you. They'll be looking at you and they'll tell you something, and they'll watch your reaction. And if you look like it's awful or whatever, they may not tell you anymore, because they think you can't handle this.
Right.
So again, you've got to just be not shocked. You just go, okay, and let them keep talking. And sometimes we had interviews where the child wouldn't say too much, or they give a disclosure, reasonable disclosure. But then 4 or 5 days later, they say, I didn't tell you everything. And that used to cause us a few problems early on, because defense barristers would try and say, well, why didn't they say that in the first place? But this psychologist said, they're testing you. They're seeing if you does this person believe me? Because they've been told a lot. Nobody will believe you. Nobody will believe you. But they're looking to see, does he believe me? And then when we go out and actually arrest the offender, they think, oh wow, he did believe me.
Okay.
Then they'll come back and open up to more.
Okay.
And the psychology of it is really, really interesting.
Fascinating, Mike. So with the offender, they're obviously, well, let me ask you the question. You're dealing with different situations here, because maybe you've got one that is admitting to what they've done, and now it's a case of seeing at what level they're admitting their crime. And then you've got the other person who's just out and out denying their crime. And so you're trying to work differently with those two people as well.
Yeah. Because, as you say, a lot of people will admit stuff, try and minimize it.
Oh, they will? That's a surprise for me. So can you just briefly talk about that?
So one case I can remember where because it's pretty horrible stuff. But the offender was saying, I didn't actually put my penis in a vagina, but I put it by the entrance, but I didn't actually put it in,
Huh.
because he saw that as a line too far to admit that. We knew he had because we had forensic evidence that he had.
Okay.
But they'll try and minimise it.
Mm.
So yeah,
So we have offenders who will try to minimize their crime, but in some way they're also admitting to a level of it, right?
yeah, yeah.
And you have some offenders, I'm going to guess, which are just out and out denying across the board.
Yep.
And does that prove to be more of a challenge or equal of a challenge to the person that's minimizing?
Um, everyone's different, really,
Yeah.
because very often when if they're out and out denying, and you've got forensic evidence to show that they have committed an offence, then that's quite easy. Whereas if they're minimising, that can be.
Mm.
I mean, they're admitting to an extent, but it can be difficult to show the extra that they've done. But which is why the interview with the child is so important, and it's so important to get as much information out of the child as you can, because what you don't want to happen is, whilst the video is played for their evidence in chief, they can still be cross-examined, albeit they're in another room and it's done by video link, and the barristers will take off their wigs and gowns and things like that to make it less intimidating.
Okay.
But so the more you can get out of the child for their evidence in their video interview, the less they'll get cross-examined. So that's what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Is protect them as much as you can from the cross-examination.
Do you ever, or did you ever experience offenders who showed remorse that you believed was genuine?
I think they show remorse, but I think it's more
Because they got
it's not
caught.
remorse. They're sorry, but they're sorry they've been caught.
They got caught.
That's the thing. It's not true remorse, and they're sorry for what they've done. It's sorry they've been caught. Yeah.
And yeah, they wouldn't have any remorse if they hadn't been caught. They'd just continue committing the crime.
I think so. Yeah.
What would you like to say to, or in your experience, your career, any things that, any like not highlights, but important points of how society deal with this, or how the police force deal with this, or any things that come to mind that you kind of learned from your career?
I think one of the big things, I think personally, is that people don't like to think it happens. They really don't like to think it happens. And I've been talking recently to another survivor, and we're almost able to talk, right, a bit like I am with you, really, at a different level, because I haven't experienced it, but I know it happens where you experience it. And we almost have that nice shiny veneer of society stripped away. We actually know what it's like underneath. But I think for the majority of people, they don't like that. They want to believe that everything is lovely, and this nasty, murky world doesn't exist, and it's difficult for them. And that's a challenge for juries, in a crown court. That they hear some things which is so far, they're just people off the street, that they're hearing things which is so far out of their area of normality. It's a challenge for them sometimes to think that actually, this does happen. It did happen. Yeah.
Do you think the crime is increasing in modern day?
No. I mean, obviously the internet stuff is a new phenomenon, so that didn't exist. But no, children have always been abused, always.
Do you think children have been abused for thousands of years?
Yeah.
Even in like the Greek times, for an example. You reckon?
Yeah, very much.
And what it's always, if it's always been happening like that, because that's a question I've been asking myself for some time. So police have always had to deal with this crime.
Well, no, I think we're having to deal with it more. But I think that's because it's easier to report now.
Right.
I know of people who I've talked to who were abused in the 30s and 40s.
Right.
They're very old people now, but they'll say, "Well, he was not going to tell. Nobody was going to believe me. He was this position of authority, or this. He was a pillar of society. Everybody looked up to him, and nobody was going to believe me." And one of the real tragedies is that children sometimes children who are being abused become what's seen as problem children. They have problems at school, etc., etc. So then, even more, who's going to believe them?
Yes.
They're always in trouble at school. They're this, they're that.
Yes.
I mean, I've been to several houses and arrested um, the father or stepfather, whatever, and the mother or stepmother has said, "Oh, she's always making stuff up."
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Can't
yeah,
believe it.
yeah. Difficult.
Can we talk a little bit about court?
Yeah.
And that's definitely a challenging time for the person who is on, let's say, the receiving end of that court situation, the person who's trying to prosecute the person that abused them. So we're talking adults here, I suppose. That's pretty horrific situation for many. I'm pretty sure that some get to the court day and actually don't want to do it in the end, but that doesn't matter. Maybe that happens, maybe that doesn't. I'm not sure. But I know it's a long, drawn-out process for people to get prosecutions. What's it like in general in the courtroom?
Um, I think if you've got as far as the courtroom, actually, it's you're over the biggest hurdle.
Okay.
The biggest hurdle we used to find really was getting a charging decision past the Crown Prosecution Service.
Yes.
Because they have two criteria that it's got to satisfy before they'll allow you to charge. The first is the evidential test. Is there sufficient evidence to provide a realistic prospect of conviction? And if that is a yes, then they go to the public interest test. Is this in the public interest? The vast majority of cases we would deal with, if they pass the evidential test, it would be in the public interest. Very rarely would they say no, it's not.
And that's because there's a criminal involved in this.
Yeah.
Who's still alive and still out there.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, very occasionally they may say, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head here,
Yes.
If somebody was terminally ill and had 3 weeks to live, they might say, well, it's not in the public interest to run a prosecution on this. What are we going to achieve?
Right.
So I'm using a very extreme thing there for why they might say it's not in the public interest. But the main thing is the evidential test. And of course, in a Crown Court, you've got to get to the burden of proof, if you will, is very high. It's beyond all reasonable doubt that this is the case. And I used to say this to a lot of people, both in children and but also adults. The mere fact that somebody gets found not guilty does not mean that people didn't believe you. They just couldn't be sure.
Right.
So that's the thing. You've got to be sure, because if you're going to send somebody to prison for 12 years, you need to be sure that they're guilty. And that's right. As I say, I used to say to people after, if we'd had a case and the person had been acquitted, and they'd be saying, nobody believed me. I said, no, it's not that they didn't believe you. It's not the case. But they had to be, sure. And they couldn't quite be sure because of this or that or something else. So yeah, it's a high burden of proof to get past.
And we want the system to be like that. Of course,
it's right. It's right because as I say, if you want to send somebody to prison for 12 years, it's a big thing.
Yes, absolutely.
But so that's why the investigation and the thoroughness of the investigation is so important. Because I look back on cases which I thought we should convict that, and we didn't, and perhaps there are lessons we could have learned. We could have done something more. Could have done something different. So yeah, but I mean, in fairness, the police are very good at learning the lessons very good. As I say, we don't always get it right, but we will always look back and say, what went wrong there, and what can we learn for the future.
What would your words be to anyone that is angry with the police about a prosecution attempt that the police couldn't help them make successful?
Well, first thing I'll say is I understand your anger, really. But the police are part of the criminal justice system, and I've seen colleagues of mine, absolutely tearing their hair out, frustrated because they couldn't get, and it's not that the police normally don't want to. If the police do, it's the criminal justice system that is making it difficult.
Right.
But we need to accept we're the police, we're the face that the public see, so it's going to be us that people get angry with. And
yes.
You've got to understand that when you join, that you sign up to that. So because people quite understandably are angry, and they need somebody.
Yes.
You can't. It's difficult to be angry to a system.
Yes.
If you've got a face, you can be angry at that person.
Yes.
So I understand.
So what is the kind of thing that makes strong evidence? Let's take my case, for example, which is historic. It happened 25 years ago. What would the police be looking for a case like from that era, for it to be strong?
What you would look at? I mean, I didn't mention it earlier, but I went down to the Falkland Islands and led an historic child abuse investigation down there. And what you're looking for is corroboration, because, as I said, as we were saying earlier, the jury have got to be sure. So we'll get your evidence, what you say happened, and then we'll try and build a case around that. So, for instance, not using your case, but the person says that I used to go to Scouts every Thursday, and the guy used to give me a lift home on his own.
Yes.
So we'd go and find other people who were at the Scout meeting and say, do you remember this? Did he used to give him a lift home? So we got a little bit of profit. Yes, he did. And the boy may say, whenever I got home, I was always upset. So we'd go to his parents and say, when he used to get back, do you remember he was always upset? So you're looking to corroborate, the story that you've taken from the victim, pick up on bits around it, and just things like that, really. Each case is different what you can find, but that, going back again to the interview with the victim, is so important, because what you're looking for is stuff which they may think is irrelevant, but actually we can corroborate that. If he always had a blue car or whatever, you can go back and check, did he have a blue car? Is that right? You're always looking to build corroboration around what the person is telling you.
Okay, so for an investigation of one case must be so expensive.
It can be, yeah. I mean, I guess working in the public sector, we were a little bit lucky that it didn't come. We didn't think, we're spending a lot of time on this, and it's not worth it, because it was. If it was a job, it was worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be really expensive.
Yeah, maybe I should have worded that as so much goes into investigating one case.
Yeah.
Therefore, obviously, subsequently, there's a lot of time spent on it, which is where we see the money part of the conversation come into it. But yes, a lot goes into just to investigating one case.
Massive, yeah. And a lot of the detective will be emotionally involved in it. He's determined. He sees you and takes your account, and then you're determined to do the best for you. And that's, if you can't, that's quite difficult as well. If you have to go back and say, well, we can't prosecute because of this, and this. I mean, and I don't know enough about your case, but it's not nice.
Yeah, and when the officer who's been investigating that case, let's say for a year, gets told actually it didn't get accepted by the CPS, we got to drop it. That's obviously gut-wrenching for the person who went through the experience, but for the police officer as well.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, very often we'd appeal the decision,
Yes.
or we'd. So I mean, sometimes the CPS will come back and they'll say, right, we can't prosecute because of this, this, and this. So you can then go away and say, right, we'll do this to cover that. We'll do that to cover that, and then go back to them again.
Okay.
But you know, the crime prosecution service are massively under resourced. That's the big problem. They're
Wow.
massively under resourced. I mean, the time it takes to get a case, to get a case reviewed, is just ridiculous.
Wow. And the frustration from society for that is that in all that time that things are being delayed for a decision, that criminal is still out there potentially continuing to commit the crime.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of frustrations from society's side, which is understandable, but it's nice to actually speak to somebody who's been in it, and that to see actually that this takes a lot of hard work and investment of you as a person to investigate these crimes.
Yeah.
And what would you like to say to police officers whose morale is down, who work in these departments?
Just stay in the fight, really. Just stay in the fight. You know, I loved my career. I really enjoyed it, but there were days it wasn't great. You know, when
Yes.
you put a lot of time and effort into a job, and the CPS come back and say, no, we're not going to prosecute it. But just stay in the fight, because tomorrow's another day.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and the mission is so great. The mission is
Yeah.
so pure.
Yeah, and I used to say about social workers actually as well, that because they get a lot of stick
Yes.
around this area. But I used to say, nobody joined the social services to do a bad job. You know,
Yes.
they joined because they wanted to make a difference. Their difficulties come with lack of resourcing,
Yes.
lack of time, etc. You know, nobody thought, do you know, I'm going to be a social worker. I'm going to be a police officer because I want to do a really rubbish job.
Yeah.
It never
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, and I'd like to say even nobody goes into those jobs thinking, "Oh, it's just a job. I've got to find something." It's like they really want to try to get in there and do a good job and make some change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very difficult when it comes to children and this subject of child sexual abuse in particular. Did you
Yeah.
ever have to watch videos or content that had been created by the criminal?
Yeah.
You did, and I mean, my goodness, that must have been one of the most difficult things, because that is going to mentally scar you as well, because it's already an uncomfortable topic just to talk about it, but to actually see it happen in video format, I mean, how was that?
We used to try and do it in a very controlled way, really, because we, with child abuse images on the internet, etc., they get graded, um, and on just how bad they are, from bad
Yeah.
to awful.
Okay.
And the officer in the case has to go through and do that, grade them, and then present his findings to the court. So, but we used to do it in a very controlled way. So he'd go into a room on his own, nobody else there, because we had a team of 8 DCs, and they all don't need to see it, So almost one person would go off with his case and go and do it on their own. It's not nice.
Wow.
Nice.
Is it shown in court?
No, no. They take the word of the officer. The jury certainly won't see it. They take the word of the officer. I mean, if the defence wanted to say, for instance, the officer said this is a category C, and the defence were disputing that, they might sit with the judge and say, well, we don't agree with this, but etc. etc. But that's very rare. They normally take the findings of the officer.
Okay, so these are graded using letters.
Yeah. Well, they were back,
Yeah. Okay.
a few years ago. That may have changed, but yeah.
Okay, so let's take what was going on when you were in work. Oh, is it from A?
Yeah.
A being
A would be a picture of a naked child.
Okay, and then it goes up to,
I think it was E, which would be a rape of a child.
wow. So you got right. So I just want to make this point, because I am wanting in my work to back the police and encourage the police and get everybody to realize that, you try doing that job, right? So you've just watched a video category E. That is going to affect you for your life, not just that, but it's going to affect you mentally. What the police must have systems in place to support you workers while you're doing this job.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Avon and Somerset were really, really good, because they offered us counselling to go to see counsellors. But of course, we're all macho and nobody went. And also, there's a stigma. I don't need it. I don't need it. So what they did, and I think it was just brilliant, is they made it a lawful order.
Wow.
You will go for counselling every 3 months.
Wow.
That's an order. So what that did was remove the stigma. Somebody saying, "Oh, I'm struggling a bit here," is you could say to your mates, "Oh, I gotta go off for counselling again," and then when you got to the counsellor, you could go.
Yeah.
It was really, really good. I think that was so clever and forward thinking.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Because to take care of the workforce that are doing this type of work is essential, because then they can continue to do their job.
Yeah. Yeah. They also at one time they had a tenure, so you were only allowed to do it for 3 years.
Oh,
You had to come off, which was good in some ways, but also you lost a lot of expertise. And
yes, that was my first thought.
Yeah. So it was almost a very blunt instrument to address the problems. We'll only let them do it for 3 years, and then we'll take them off. But as I say, what that did was you lost a lot of expertise and experience. So they stopped doing that. They stopped the tenure, and as I say, I did it for 6 years. But what they did do was make mandatory counselling. You had to go for counselling.
Yes.
And obviously the counsellor, if the counsellor picked up on anything and thought, "Oh, this person's really struggling," they would report back to your bosses and say, he needs to come off.
Okay. Yeah. So everything's monitored closely.
Yeah.
I talk on my channels, not a lot because I get a lot of backlash from it, but I want to continue talking about it, about actually preventing this from happening, preventing the crime from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
So, we are, from my experience, and being in these circles now for 4.5 years, there is so much out there about education within children, education in schools, education in homes, open conversations, body awareness, consent, private areas, all of that. And those conversations are flowing. I see a lot of them. And I like that. I think it's a fantastic thing. I'm pretty sure that wasn't happening 30 years ago. It definitely wasn't happening when I was at school. We had no education about things like that. So what a great move forward, something we should feel optimistic about. But a bigger part of the puzzle is the person who's committing the crime. Because if we can get them to stop doing that, we don't need to rely on children to protect themselves, essentially, by teaching them about their body, etc. So, if we go upstream from the education of children, we come to the criminals. Do you believe that we can have some success at some point in the future with stopping these criminals from committing the crime in the first place?
I think we could. I don't know if you've heard of the Lucy Faithful Foundation.
Yes.
They work with offenders, but also people can contact them if they think they're going to start. So there needs to be some more work around that. I mean, there's a lot of good work done around safeguarding with, say, for instance, a rugby club or a football club, cricket club, where they've got safeguarding policies where people don't do one-to-one stuff with children. They can't take a child to a game on their own. They shouldn't. So there's lots of good work has gone on, but I mean, it's the problem is with that is that whatever you put in place, a predatory paedophile, they're very, very resourceful and manipulative, and they're always trying to find a way around.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You've always got to be alert to it. I think the biggest way to prevent it is for what I mean. I really like what you're doing is to make it out there and people talk about it, because it's really difficult. Somebody's a really good football coach, for instance, or whatever. But he always goes in the change rooms with the boys afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, is to raise awareness of it, and to make it okay to talk about it.
Yes.
That's the big thing. Make it okay
Yes.
to talk about it, and
Yes.
raise your concerns, and have reporting channels. I'm a bit concerned about this, but I don't know who to tell or where to go. If you can make that better,
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important.
So everyone would know where to go. What do I've seen something that looks a bit suspicious. I don't feel very good about a certain someone. Who can I go and talk to?
Yeah,
Like, that should be common knowledge, right?
yeah,
And for the young people, if they feel like they're being groomed, or they are in a situation that they need to get out of, that's dangerous, that they know exactly who they can go to, but not just one person, a number of channels.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
But I mean, because I do a little bit of training with a charity, and the big thing that I try and get across to new people joining the charity is, don't try and investigate yourself. Tell the safeguarding lead, because if you're uncomfortable with something, tell this person, and then it can be looked into, and it may be perfect, it may be okay, maybe
yeah.
okay. You're not saying this person's a bad, but all you're saying is, it's just something I'm a bit uncomfortable with. Do you think
Yeah.
this is right? And it can get looked at by somebody who with more experience
Yes.
than you. Don't carry the monkey on your shoulder.
Yes.
Give it to an expert to look at.
Yes. I agree.
So,
I agree. Okay, Mike. Time flies. Hey, it's 5:02 already. So let's close it up here. I just appreciate you coming and speaking so openly as well. I don't think many people would be up for that. So I really appreciate that. We all, everyone watching or listening, also appreciate the work that you've done throughout your life, and how many people you've put in prison, convicted, but also how many children you've saved. That must be a phenomenal feeling. All power to you. To any police people who are or anybody involved in the police force that's watching, I hope you got some kind of lift out of our conversation today. Is there anything you'd like to leave my audience with? Anything at all?
I don't know.
That
Let's
put you
put me
right
on
on
the
the
spot.
spot, Mike.
Yeah,
I know. I thought it would as I asked you it.
yeah.
Anything? Let me reword it. Is there anything you'd like to say about what you've experienced throughout your working career, and how possibly we can move forward as a society?
Well, what I've always thought was that paedophiles like to work in the shadows, and like secrecy, and like people not talking. So I always used to say, let's open the lid and let the light, the purifying light, flood in. So don't let people keep secrets. If you're worried about something, say something to somebody.
Incredible.
And because if pedophiles like secrets, they don't like people talking and sharing information. So yeah, if there's anything that concerns you, tell someone that is going to be able to do something about it.
Incredible, Mike. Thank you so much. Before we close off, is there anything you'd like to promote? I know you're not like running your own thing, but is there anything you'd like to promote before we finish? No, we've mentioned about Lucy Faithfull Foundation. If you are interested in this conversation, do go check them out. Just Google Lucy Faithfull Foundation. They are a charity working with offenders, and they are doing very interesting and incredible work. So, Mike, thank you so much. Thank you for approaching me on social media. I really appreciate it. And let's stay in contact and have more of these conversations.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for getting to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'm not sure whether you know, but due to my recent demonetization on YouTube, it means YouTube is not going to spread my work like it would any other channel, including my podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, if you are listening to this on your podcast app. So please do hit the like button, do leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji thumbs up, because that does help the algorithm and helps me try to get this work in front of new people. I cannot do this alone. This has to be a team effort, and we're all here on the same mission to break this silence and get children better protected. Thank you.